people to your ordinary people, Americans. I really appreciate.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy and President Biden meet at the White House as Zelenskyy makes a high-stakes visit to Washington, D.C. His first known trip outside of his home country since the Russian invasion began 300 days ago. He's set to speak to Congress soon as lawmakers vote on whether to provide $45 billion in more emergency aid. Dozens of states are on alert for snow, cold, and wind as a major holiday storm is sweeping across the country. It's causing a travel nightmare with thousands of flight delays and cancellations today. The city's at risk for life-threatening cold. The first look at former President Trump's tax returns after a congressional committee voted to make some documents public. What preliminary details reveal about just how much income tax he paid from 2015 to 2020 and the year he didn't pay anything at all. After some back and forth in a Bahamas courtroom, former FTX CEO Sam Bankman-Fried has signed extradition papers agreeing to return to the U.S. to face charges over the collapse of his now bankrupt crypto exchange. How soon he could face a federal judge in New York. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. We are tracking a major Christmas storm and the travel woes that come along with it. But we begin tonight with a monumental day in our nation's capital, 300 days after Russia invaded Ukraine. Tonight, the world is watching Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy as he's in Washington, D.C. on his first known trip outside of Ukraine since Russia's war there began. Zelenskyy is set to address a joint meeting of Congress in about 30 minutes after traveling to the U.S. under incredibly tight security. A few hours ago, the wartime leader met with President Biden at the White House. His message to Americans tonight: we will win. President Biden told Zelenskyy he and the Ukrainian people have inspired the world. Zelenskyy presented Biden with a medal from a captain on the front lines in Ukraine who wanted President Biden to have it. And a small bit of history: nearly 81 years ago to the day, December 26, 1941, wartime leader Winston Churchill addressed Congress under the shadow of the last major war in Europe, saying in part, "Here we are together, facing a group of mighty foes who seek our ruin. Here we are together, defending all that to free men is dear." Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, cognizant of the history we will see tonight, telling Zelenskyy her father was in the room as a member of Congress when Churchill gave that speech. Tonight, Pelosi said democracy itself is on the line. ABC's congressional correspondent Rachel Scott leads us off.
With a warm handshake, President Biden and the First Lady welcoming Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to the White House. Zelenskyy, a wartime leader now, in his signature military fatigues. Biden putting his arm around him as they walked into the White House.
Well, Mr. President, it's good to have you back.
Zelensky's historic visit, his first time leaving Ukraine since Russia's invasion 300 days ago.
300 days. Hard to believe. 300 days. Been going through this, and Putin's ways to brutal assault on the Ukraine's right to exist as a nation and the attack on innocent Ukrainian people.
Zelenskyy expressing deep gratitude.
All my appreciations from my heart, from the hearts of Ukrainians, all Ukrainians, from our nation, strong nations, all the appreciation to you, first of all, Mr. President, for your big support, and thanks from our just ordinary people to your ordinary people, Americans. I really appreciate.
President Biden announced a new $1.85 billion aid package, and that the U.S. will now send Ukraine the powerful Patriot missile defense system, something Zelenskyy has sought for months to protect against Russian missile and drone attacks.
We understand in our bones that Ukraine's fight is part of something much bigger. The American people know that if we stand by in the face of such blatant attacks on liberty and democracy and the core principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity, the world would surely face worse consequences.
Zelenskyy then speaking directly to the American people.
My message: I wish you peace, and I wish you to see your children alive and adult. And I wish you to see your children when they will go to universities, and to see their children. And of course, to be together with us, jointly, because we really fight for our common victory against this tyranny. That is real life, and we will win. And I really want win together. Thanks so much. Not want, sorry, I'm sure.
President Biden with this pledge.
But I want you to know, President Zelenskyy, I want you to know that all the people of Ukraine to know as well. The American people have been with you every step of the way, and we will stay with you. We will stay with you for as long as it takes.
Biden pledging ongoing support from this country. Rachel Scott joins us now from the Capitol. Rachel, as President Zelenskyy prepares to address Congress and the American people tonight, what can we expect? What's he ideally looking to achieve?
Well, we can expect him to make a very direct appeal for more military and humanitarian aid. Just moments ago, he arrived here on Capitol Hill, meeting with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Congress is considering sending an additional $45 billion in aid to Ukraine, but some Republicans are skeptical. Republican leader Kevin McCarthy warning against the U.S. sending a blank check to Ukraine. So tonight, Zelenskyy will make his case directly, not only to lawmakers, but also the American public, Lindsay.
All right, Rachel Scott, our thanks to you as always. We'll hear from you more tonight. Let's bring in ABC's Terry Moran, our resident historian who's at the White House tonight. Terry, you were there for that joint press conference with President Biden and Zelenskyy this afternoon. And this visit does have some echoes of history when another wartime leader visited the U.S. Give us a sense of the stakes of this trip.
Yeah, it sure does have those echoes. They were so strong today. For a moment, it seemed, the White House was transformed. The daily grind of American politics faded away, and something larger and more awful emerged. You have to go back to 1941, right after Pearl Harbor, December, before Christmas, when Winston Churchill sailed the submarine-infested waters of the Atlantic to come here to the White House for weeks and forge the American Anglo Alliance and plan strategy with Franklin Roosevelt in World War II. And it had that quality here today. There was President Zelenskyy in the East Room of the White House, in his khaki clothes, right from the battlefields of Ukraine, and standing there and bringing that deeply personal message that he did, that he wished Americans peace, that we can see our children alive and grown up to be adults. Sitting there in that room, it was so unexpected, the emotion that he brought, that it really brought home the suffering and the terror that Ukrainian families have been enduring for 300 days now. And that, Lindsay, is what he wanted to do. He wanted to get Americans and people around the world once again to understand that this war matters in that way and that their fight is for us too. Lindsay?
He certainly made it personal in that way. Terry Moran from the White House. Thanks so much, Terry. Former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, John Sullivan, joins us now. Ambassador, we thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. Many people are comparing this moment to when British Prime Minister Winston Churchill addressed Congress shortly after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Put this in context for us. Is tonight a potentially history-making event?
It certainly is, Lindsay. It's a very historic moment. The last time there was a war like we're seeing now on the European continent was 77 years ago at the end of World War II. So the historical comparison is apt, and Zelenskyy's heroism so far this year in this war is reaching Churchillian proportions. I mean, he's really been a resilient, bold leader who has kept Ukraine in the war and pushed the Russians back.
And, of course, this is the first time that Zelenskyy has left Ukraine since the war started 300 days ago. Why is U.S. support particularly crucial right now?
Well, several reasons, Lindsay. First, there's just the volume of the billions of dollars that the United States has given and spent to defend or help Ukraine defend itself. But it's also the message that the United States, as a leader of in NATO and around the world, leading democracies and like-minded countries in resisting this naked aggression that Russia launched, as you noted, 300 days ago. And the messaging that comes out of this visit is very, very important, not just for the U.S., not just for Ukraine, but for the globe, which is why the Russian government is so sensitive to what's happening here.
Well, what message does this send right now to Russian President Vladimir Putin?
Well, Putin has been trying to send a message to us that he's all in. He's not going to stand down from the goals that he set a long time ago for this so-called special military operation. And what President Biden has done today in inviting President Zelenskyy into the White House, sitting with him in the Oval Office, giving him as strong an embrace as an American president can. That's a pretty strong statement from the United States of our enduring support for Ukraine and its resistance to this war of aggression by Russia.
You know, anecdotally, I've heard from some Americans who say, gosh, we've already given billions of dollars. You know, at what point, at what cost do we continue to give? Even though they do support Ukraine, but how much can we afford to continue giving? What would your response be to the average American who is concerned that maybe we're giving too much?
Well, two things. First, I'd say that there's definitely a conversation to be had about the overall level of financial support that any one country, whether it's the United States or one of our other allies and partners, contributes to Ukraine's defense. So burden sharing among allies and partners is a legitimate topic, as is a discussion of whether any particular weapon system should be given or provided to Ukraine. But what we can't lose sight of, Lindsay, is who our adversary is, who the country that launched this aggressive war against Ukraine. Russia, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, who is supposed to be guaranteeing world peace, has plunged Europe into the first major war on the continent in 77 years. So we have to really keep our eye on the ball about how important it is that we assist Ukraine in defending itself, because if Russia prevails here, the consequences for the world and therefore for the United States will be grave.
Ambassador, as you well know, today Putin announced substantial new investments in the military, including increasing the size of the country's armed forces and accelerating weapon development programs. Does this highly public state visit and the pledge to send Patriot missiles to Ukraine also risk further provoking Putin?
Well, certainly, I've seen the statements that have come out of the Kremlin, including by the defense minister, Shoigu. Look, Putin is all in. Putin is going to devote all he can, whatever resources he can, to prevailing in this conflict. What's important for Americans to understand is that our security, the national security of the United States, is significantly impacted by this conflict. It's not just European allies who are threatened. It threatens global peace. Whether he will go so far as to use what the Russians call special weapons, nuclear war, which he's threatened. I think the current assessment is that's not likely, but nuclear blackmail is something that the Russians have used in the past.
Former Ambassador John Sullivan, can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
Thank you, Lindsay. My pleasure.
Now to the major Christmas storm sweeping the country. 40 states are under alerts for snow, wind, and even blizzard conditions. The system will push its way into the Northeast by tomorrow night, with dangerous cold coming right behind it. Our senior meteorologist Rob Marciano is tracking it for us, but we begin with ABC's Alex Perez in Chicago.
This is an absolute whiteout.
Tonight, what the National Weather Service is calling a once-in-a-generation storm, unleashing chaos on millions of holiday travelers taking to the roads. Heavy squalls engulfing drivers on I-90 east of Rapid City, South Dakota. The storm leaving massive snow drifts and wrecked vehicles behind in Washington state. In Oregon, sheriffs confirming one person was killed in a multi-vehicle accident on an icy Interstate 84 overnight. And from Chicago's O'Hare to New York's LaGuardia, families packing airports. Airlines already canceling more than 800 flights tomorrow. Behind that snow and wind come the coldest temperatures in decades, stretching all the way to the deep south. In Texas, officials insist they are prepared to handle power outages.
The power grid will remain up and running very robustly during this very cold snap.
The governor expressing some confidence in the power system there. Alex Perez joins us now. Alex, temperatures expected to plunge even further there?
Yeah, Lindsay, here in Chicago, we are bracing for a sharp 36-degree temperature drop here tomorrow. It will feel like 30 below zero. When it's that cold, frostbite can begin to set in less than 10 minutes. Lindsay?
All right, stay warm, Alex. Thanks so much. Let's get right to Rob Marciano, who's tracking this major storm and the brutal, life-threatening cold behind it. Hey, Rob.
Hi, Lindsay. Boy, this thing's really starting to get cranking now. We had wind chills measured at 70 below zero in Montana this morning. And overnight tonight, I think temperatures in places like Denver will drop 50, 60 degrees in just a matter of hours. Here's a look at the map. It's lit up like the proverbial Christmas tree with a lot of red there. Blizzard warnings are expanding, and we've got advisories from coast to coast with this massive storm that is now picking up some steam. All right, let's go over the low and what we expect it to do here. Over the next 12 hours, we'll start to see it intensify and then rapidly intensify as it approaches Chicago during the day tomorrow. Notice a push of warm and wet conditions ahead of it across the I-95 corridor tomorrow afternoon. It'll be windy as well. And as this thing bombs out and rapidly intensifies, that's going to deepen the low and expand the wind field, which means that it's going to be windy across a huge swath of the Northeast and the Great Lakes and into parts of the Mid-Atlantic, and that will cause power outages. And even if it's not snowing in your area, where it does snow, we're only talking about maybe 6 to 12 inches, but it's going to be blowing for hours, if not days on end in spots. And in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, where temperatures will be warm enough for mostly just rain, we'll see a flash freeze as the rain ends and the cold air moves in. All right, some of these startling numbers: minus 33 in Chicago for a wind chill come Friday morning. But Dallas, Houston, you're in the single digits. That's dangerous cold for at least that power grid, if not for folks who are suspect. And then we're looking for that cold to spread eastward across the entire East Coast, including Florida, come Saturday morning. Minus 19 in Pittsburgh for Christmas Eve morning, and Christmas Day, Lindsay, does not get any warmer. So we're in here as we head towards the new year. Doesn't look very warm, does it?
You got the long haul of this Arctic polar plunge. Rob Marciano, our thanks to you as always. Utility crews are making some progress restoring power and water in Northern California after a deadly earthquake there. Nearly all power is restored. Fewer than 700 customers still remain in the dark. At least 80 aftershocks have been reported since the initial quake struck Humboldt County. The magnitude 6.4 earthquake caused widespread damage and launched a state of emergency. 2 people died of medical emergencies. Tonight, after years of legal battles reaching all the way to the Supreme Court, Americans are getting their first look at former President Trump's tax returns. What we already know tonight is how much he paid in income tax from 2015 to 2020, and the 1 year that he didn't pay any income tax at all. Our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, reports.
The most surprising thing we've learned from the release of Donald Trump's tax returns is that they weren't even being audited for the first 2 years of his presidency, despite a long-standing IRS rule that a president's taxes are to be automatically audited.
I was actually shocked that the IRS had not been following its own policy.
And Donald Trump repeatedly claimed he was under audit, including when I asked him more than 4 years ago if he would be willing to turn over his returns to Congress.
You told me the other day that you are an open book, so... I think I am an open book. So, point blank, Democrats go after your tax returns. Will you try to block that, or will you allow them to have them?
Well, look, as I've told you, they're under audit. They have been for a long time. If I were finished with the audit, I would have an open mind to it. I would say that, but I don't want to do it during the audit.
The committee has released key details for the 6 years of Trump's tax returns they obtained, 2015 to 2020. During 3 of those years, Trump paid $750 or less in federal income taxes. The self-described billionaire paying less in income taxes than a typical school teacher. During the year of his 2016 presidential campaign, Trump claimed a net loss of $32 million, paying just $750 in taxes. Republicans expressed outrage at the committee's decision to make Trump's returns public.
Unfortunately, the Supreme Court chose not to intervene to stop the flimsy and admittedly partisan Democrat efforts to target former President Trump for purely political reasons.
Let's get right to Jonathan Karl, who joins us now from Washington. John, what is the big question that many are asking tonight?
I mean, the big question, at least to me, is why did the IRS fail to audit Trump's tax returns as required clearly by their own rules during the first 2 years of his presidency? We've asked the IRS that question, Lindsay, but still no answer.
All right, Jonathan Carl for us in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much, John.
Thank you.
The founder of FTX, who lost billions of dollars, is being extradited to the U.S. tonight to face charges stemming from the collapse of his cryptocurrency exchange. ABC's Aaron Katursky has more.
Tonight, Sam Bankman-Fried is going to be leaving the Bahamas, heading for the United States to face criminal charges over the collapse of his crypto exchange, FTX. Bankman-Fried waived extradition from the Bahamas and will fly to New York, where prosecutors have accused him of running one of the biggest financial frauds in American history.
I think this is a good move that he's no longer contesting extradition. He will appear much more reasonable in front of his judge here in the Southern District of New York, and he can get going with his case here on American soil.
Bankman-Fried returns to the U.S. a far cry from the heralded crypto executive he once was. He's accused of stealing billions from FTX customers and investors and using it for his private hedge fund, to buy lavish real estate, and to make political donations as he sought influence in Washington.
Quite a downfall. Aaron Katursky joins us now. So, Aaron, what's next for Bankman-Fried?
Once he lands, Bankman-Fried will be held overnight, Lindsay, and then he will be brought here to court in the morning. It's expected that he's going to ask to be released on bail. You can imagine it's going to be a rather restrictive bail package, and the financial amount attached to it will be rather large. But from there, the prosecution wheel begins to turn. Bankman-Fried is facing up to 115 years in prison if he's convicted, Lindsay.
Aaron Katursky, our thanks to you as always. The Taliban has now made the decision to ban all Afghan girls and women of all ages from attending schools and universities, effective immediately. Some male teachers have quit in protest. Many Afghans are calling on government employees to boycott working for the Taliban, hoping to force them to reverse the decision. When we come back, take a look. This is not a normal plane landing. It's actually a life-saving moment for an infant. How an entire community came together to make it happen. Comedian and actress Amanda Seales tells us how she captivates millions of fans, tackling big issues like race and politics with humor. But up next, why these beautiful fields may one day save the world, and the billionaires trying to own as much of it as they can.
This is the place where they found Gloria's body.
What do you think?
I think I'm angry.
TV's best new drama is now streaming on Hulu.
We can choose to fight and to not back down.
Boots on the ground. It's time. Swank and Dove have terrific chemistry.
Someone has to expose these guys.
You expose people. You worry about blowback?
That sounds like a threat.
A superior show with a shocking twist you don't want to miss.
Please don't do this.
Alaska Daily, now streaming on Hulu.
Get ready, America, every Friday.
The hottest trends, styles, and must-have. What's the right stuff to buy right now? I really love that. It's time to buy the right stuff.
Yes!
And save big time, too.
The right stuff.
Fridays on GMA. You're gonna love it.
Okay, it seems everywhere you turn, there is another wild con. And tonight, we're serving up 2 juicy cons.
Woo, wild.
First up,
not everybody has their pastor on the FBI's most wanted list.
Hold up. What? How much did this man lose?
$40 million was stolen. And imagine having a best friend who says they're royalty.
But wait, there's a catch. What? No. If you think you would never, ever fall for a con, don't be so sure.
Tonight on 20/20 at 9/8 Central on ABC.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
Name?
Special Agent Will Trent.
You just brought down a bunch of corrupt cops. That's kind of hot.
Will's my best agent. He can teach you to see things no one else does. There's a kidnapping.
There's a bunch of uniforms outside plotting your murder.
As you can see, I'm overjoyed about it.
Why Will Trent?
He read that crime scene like a book.
You smell like urine to you? When people call you weird, I really do defend you. But you gotta help me out.
will trend. Premieres January 3rd on ABC and stream on Hulu.
It's the type of place where you can walk home by yourself.
It really is a perfect college town.
The victim had been stabbed 19 times.
Could have been any of us. While it's wonderful to think that you can leave your doors unlocked, don't.
Death in the Dorms, only on Hulu.
Tomorrow, blizzard warnings and life-threatening cold wreaking havoc on holiday travel for millions. Flights delayed or canceled, bracing for what could be the coldest Christmas in decades. More Americans turn to the #1 program on television. World News Tonight with David Muir.
Packs should get along like a happy family. People mistake an excited dog for a happy dog. My German just told her, your energy is not healthy.
This is a great story here. Residents in an Alaskan town hopped on their snowmobiles, ATVs, and drove their SUVs to help save an infant's life, braving the sub-zero chill. They used their vehicles to light up the dark runway, allowing a medevac plane to land. Runway lights at the Deering Airport have been out for more than a week now, but an airport worker came up with this solution when he heard that an infant needed treatment, and the community jumped in to help. The baby was taken safely to a clinic. In Scotland tonight, an innovative solution to help slow the effects of climate change could just be lying in a bog. Maggie Ruley traveled to the Scottish Highlands to show us how peat restoration may just be able to save us all.
Nestled in the base of these misty mountains lies a priceless natural resource that's been trapping carbon for thousands of years: peat. And today, this wet, thick mud made up of centuries-old plants is the latest hot ticket for climate investors.
The peat we're walking on right now has the potential to make millions. It's the new green rush, with companies and billionaires coming in buying up tens of thousands of acres of this land up here in rural Scotland, restoring it and cashing in on carbon credits.
Craft beer company Brewdog is betting on bogs.
If there's a world where nobody lives, then no one's drinking beer in that world, and that's not so good.
Co-founder Martin Dickey takes us into what they've named the Lost Forest, showing us the nearly 10,000 acres of land they bought in northeastern Scotland in 2020.
It's not about your carbon today, it's about your carbon in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time. So it's a long-term, it's a generational play.
Brewdog's first brewery started just a couple hours east of here. They now ship to 55 countries. Restoring this land will help them offset the carbon their company creates, as they also work to reduce the carbon they create in the first place. But for Martin, he says it's about more than carbon credits. He grew up around here.
You don't inherit the land from your ancestors. You're actually looking after it for your children. As business owners, we felt we had the responsibility to start working hard and understanding our emissions from our business, but also doing what we can to help, rewild a little bit of Scotland and do some peat restoration work as well.
He and his team are now working with experts to rewild this land, planting native trees and letting nature take back control, making it look like it did hundreds of years ago, including vast areas of peat bogs.
The idea of peat restoration is to make sure that peat bogs stay wet. You can see these black lines are where they've been able to dam up irrigation ditches, and that lets all of the water pool here below, creating a healthy peat bog. And this is eventually what they want the entire area here to become.
Because when peat is healthy, it's an environmental powerhouse like none other on Earth. The Amazon is often called the lungs of the planet, but peat traps more carbon than a tropical rainforest, meaning the UK could be sitting on a massive, untapped resource.
This is the largest blanket peat bog in Europe and one of the largest carbon sinks in the world, because nothing else in nature stores carbon quite like peat. It makes up 3% of the Earth's surface, but holds 30% of its carbon. And 15% of the world's peat is found right here in Scotland, meaning this land could play a major role in trapping carbon and fighting climate change.
But peat grows just 1 millimeter a year, about the size of a fingernail. And right now, 80% of it in the UK is damaged.
In good condition, if it's naturally covered, it is one of the best ecosystems in the world for storing carbon. As soon as the soil is exposed to the atmosphere, it starts emitting carbon instead of saving carbon.
Claudia Rouse has worked with the government-backed organization Nature Scott for 20 years. She tells us decades of intensive agriculture, poor irrigation, and a warming planet have turned the country's peat bogs from carbon sinks into carbon sources.
It is so simple. We know how to repair it. Basically, you get a digger and you recover it over.
And the Scottish government has taken notice. The country has some of the most ambitious climate legislation in the world, pledging to become net zero by 2045.
The first milestone we've got to hit is by 2030, we have got to reduce Scotland's emissions by 75%. One of the ways we can do it in the most cost-effective way is through restoring our peatlands.
But Claudia says the government can't do it on their own.
They have earmarked £250 million over the next 10 years to pump prime the start of this peatland restoration. In order to restore all of the peatland in Scotland, which is 1.8 million.
We go now to an ABC News special report as Ukrainian President Zelenskyy prepares to address Congress.
President Zelenskyy from Ukraine to address Congress and the American people at this hour. Let's go live to the House. Zelenskyy about to address this joint meeting of Congress. Americans watching across the nation. There you see Vice President Kamala Harris, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. This wartime president will be speaking on behalf of millions of Ukrainians back home. Vladimir Putin and Russia likely monitoring this as well, and the events as they have unfolded today at the White House. As we watch that live picture of the chamber, we see the other pictures that unfolded today, being welcomed by President Biden, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden at the White House. This was earlier today, the South Lawn. The Biden administration announcing the next military aid package for Ukraine, which includes a Patriot missile defense system, which Zelenskyy had been hoping for. This was a powerful moment in the Oval Office there a moment ago, presented with medal from a Ukrainian captain on the front lines, and then that joint news conference on the world stage together. President Zelenskyy meeting with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi just a short time ago. Of course, she traveled to Ukraine with a delegation. That was last spring. Zelenskyy is coming before Congress as lawmakers now consider another $45 billion in emergency assistance to help fund Ukraine's battle against Russia. During a closed-door meeting with congressional leaders, Zelenskyy told them that without that aid package, Ukraine could lose the war. Some of the historical images, as you look at that packed chamber tonight, members of the Senate, members of Congress all there. It was Winston Churchill who addressed Congress back in 1941. As I mentioned, he was the last wartime president to make such a trip. These are the pictures we showed you earlier on World News Tonight. And it's just striking when you take into account the historical context, how long it's been since we've seen something like this play out in Washington. President Zelenskyy making the most out of his first trip out of Ukraine since Russia's invasion. It was 300 days ago now. As we have mentioned today, this is his second time addressing Congress, his first address in person. Speaker Nancy Pelosi had urged all members to attend tonight, calling Zelenskyy's appearance poignant and personal to her. Zelenskyy's visit to the nation comes less than 2 weeks before Republicans assume control of the House. He has had bipartisan support up until now. It's not expected to change, though there have been some Republicans who have questioned continuing the funding at such a level. He's expected to make the case tonight that support for Ukraine does not fade with this new Congress, that he continues to get bipartisan support. You heard that from President Biden during that joint news conference today. President Biden declaring before the world that America has stood with you from the very beginning. We will continue to do so, he said. And when asked by reporters in the room, he said he was not concerned about a changing face of Congress, not concerned about NATO and Western allies, saying we are a united front, in so many words, as we continue to support Ukraine. A source close to President Zelenskyy telling me earlier today that this trip was critical for President Zelenskyy. The president himself this fall, when we traveled to Kyiv, to the capital, to the presidential office building to interview President Zelenskyy in person. We asked him at the time, would he make the trip to the United States? Would he come to Washington? Had he been asked by President Biden? He said at the time, telling me, yes, I have been invited, but the timing would have to make sense. Very careful with how he answered that question. He said he invited President Biden to Ukraine as well, but he said he would be willing to come to U.S., but it would have to mean something, particularly with this war playing out. Keep in mind, this is a leader with a war raging back home. A lot of questions about whether or not Russia would act upon his absence. Those close to Zelensky telling me today that they believed his trip here to Washington would not make a difference, that Russia would continue to act in the way that it has even today. Zelensky, of course, learning today in person in Washington, though his team likely knew before the visit, that this Patriot missile battery is on its way to Ukraine. Ukrainians will have to be trained. You can see the Republican Senate leader, Mitch McConnell, entering the room there. He spoke out in support of this visit from Zelensky today, signaling that obviously as we move forward, there will be bipartisan support for Ukraine's President Zelensky and the effort to push back the Russians now 300 days into this war. Rachel Scott covers Congress for us. Rachel, you've been watching along with me all day here, and what is it President Zelensky hopes to achieve right here tonight?
Well, David, tonight we can expect a very direct an emotional appeal for more military and humanitarian aid from President Zelensky. We said it's been 300 days since Russia invaded Ukraine. This is his first trip outside of the country, coming here to Capitol Hill to meet with lawmakers. And soon it will be a divided government here in Washington, D.C., as Republicans are expected to take control of the House in January. You see there, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell earlier today, he said it's the morally right thing to do for America to continue to provide support to Ukraine, that it's in our best interest. And tonight, this will definitely be historic, an image that we have not seen here on Capitol Hill since 1941, when Winston Churchill addressed members of Congress. Today, Zelensky was asked what his message is to Ukraine, and he talked about a message of peace, something that is so foreign to his country, to the people who live in Ukraine right now, as they are under siege by Russia at this point. But the Congress is considering an additional $45 billion in aid. You see House Speaker Nancy Pelosi standing there at the front of the House chamber. She's actually wearing a pin that was given to her by President Zelensky when she was on the ground in Ukraine. She told all members tonight that there will be a very special focus on democracy, David.
And this is the moment, Rachel. Rachel Scott on the Hill for us. There you see President Zelensky waiting to be introduced.
Of Ukraine.
That was it. House Sergeant at Arms General William Walker introducing President Zelensky. This is an extraordinary moment playing out in Washington, and it feels an awful lot like a State of the Union address for those of you who have joined us over the many years that we've covered those live as well. Shaking hands, being welcomed by Republicans and Democrats inside that chamber for a joint meeting, we're calling this. President Zelensky clearly deciding to continue to wear what he has worn during the entire course of this war. No formal suit for him and tie. And for those of us who have met him in person, this is not a surprise. I've been told by that source close to the president that he is here in the U.S. but will leave very soon after. Obviously not giving away any travel details, but does not plan to stay here in the U.S. for very long at all. He wants to get back to Ukraine and back to the work at home. Let's listen.
Thank you so much.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi will introduce him next. Again, her trip to Ukraine, the pin she wears in honor of Ukraine tonight, and one of her final actions, one of her final duties as House Speaker.
Героям слава!
Members, members of Congress.
I think it's too much.
I think it is. Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor of presenting to you His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky, President of the Ukraine.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Dad, thank you. It's too much for me. All this for our great people. Thank you so much. Dear Americans, in all states, cities, and communities, all those who value freedom and justice, who cherish it as strongly as we Ukrainians, in all our cities, in each and every family. I hope my words of respect and gratitude resonate in each American heart. Madam Vice President, I thank you for your efforts in helping Ukraine. Madam Speaker, you bravely visited Ukraine during the full-fledged war. Thank you very much. Great honor. Thank you. Great privilege to be here. Dear members of the Congress, representatives of both parties, who also visited Kyiv, esteemed congressmen and senators from both parties who will visit Ukraine, I'm sure, in the future. Dear representatives of diaspora, present in this chamber and spread across the country, dear journalists. It's a great honor for me to be at the US Congress and speak to you and all Americans. Against all odds and doom and gloom scenarios, Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking. Thank you. And it gives me good reason to share with you our first joint victory. We defeated Russia in the battle for minds of the world. We have no fear, nor should anyone in the world have it. Ukraine's gained this victory, and it gives us courage, which inspires the entire world. Americans gained this victory, and that's why you have succeeded in uniting the global community to protect freedom and international law. Europeans gained this victory, and that's why Europe is now stronger and more independent than ever. The Russian tyranny has lost control over us. And it will never influence our minds again. Yet, we have to do whatever it takes to ensure that countries of the global south also gain such victory. I know one more, I think, very important thing. The Russians will stand a chance to be free only when they defeat the Kremlin in their minds. Yet, the battle continues, and we have to defeat the Kremlin on the battlefield. Yes, this battle is not only for the territory, for this or another part of Europe. The battle is not only for life, freedom, and security of Ukrainians or any other nation which Russia attempts to conquer. This struggle will define in what world our children and grandchildren will live, and then their children and grandchildren. It will define whether it will be a democracy of Ukrainians and for Americans, for all. This battle cannot be frozen or postponed. It cannot be ignored, hoping that the ocean or something else will provide a protection. From the United States to China, from Europe to Latin America, and from Africa to Australia, the world is too interconnected and interdependent to allow someone to stay aside and at the same time to feel safe when such a battle continues. Our two nations are allies in this battle. And next year will be a turning point. I know it, the point when Ukrainian courage and American resolve must guarantee the future of our common freedom, the freedom of people who stand for their values. Ladies and gentlemen, Americans, yesterday before coming here to Washington, D.C., I was at the front line in our Bakhmut, in our stronghold in the east of Ukraine, in the Donbass. The Russian military and mercenaries have been attacking Bakhmut non-stop since May. They have been attacking it day and night, but Bakhmut stands. Last year, 70,000 people lived there in Bakhmut, in this city, and now only few civilians stay. Every inch of that land is soaked in blood. Roaring guns sound every hour. Trenches in the Donbass change hands several times a day in fierce combat and even hand fighting, but the Ukrainian Donbass stands. Russians use everything they have against Bakhmut and our beautiful cities. The occupiers have a significant advantage in artillery. They have an advantage in ammunition. They have much more missiles and planes than we ever had. And it's true, but our defense forces stand. And we all are proud of them. The Russians' tactic is primitive. They burn down and destroy everything they see. They send thugs to the front lines. They send convicts to the war. They threw everything against us, similar to the other tyranny, which is in the Battle of the Bulge. Threw everything it had against the free world, just like the brave American soldiers, which held their lines and fought back Hitler's forces during the Christmas of 1944. Brave Ukrainian soldiers are doing the same to Putin's forces this Christmas. Ukraine holds its lines and will never surrender. So here is the front line. The tyranny which has no lack of cruelty against the lives of free people. And your support is crucial, not just to stand in such fight, but to get to the turning point to win on the battlefield. We have artillery. Yes. Thank you. We have it. Is it enough? Honestly, not really. To ensure Bakhmut is not just a stronghold that holds back the Russian army, but for the Russian army to completely pull out, more cannons and shells are needed. If so, just like the Battle of Saratoga, the fight for Bakhmut will change the trajectory of our war for independence and for freedom. If your patriots stop the Russian terror against our cities, it will let Ukrainian patriots work to the full to defend our freedom. When Russia cannot reach our cities, but its artillery, it tries to destroy them with missile attacks. More than that, Russia found an ally in this genocidal policy, Iran. Iranian deadly drones sent to Russia in hundreds became a threat to our critical infrastructure. That is how one terrorist has found the other. It is just a matter of time when they will strike against your other allies. If we do not stop them now, we must do it. I believe there should be no taboos between us in our alliance. Ukraine never asked the American soldiers to fight on our land instead of us. I assure you that Ukrainian soldiers can perfectly operate American tanks and planes themselves. Financial assistance is also critically important, and I would like to thank you very much. Thank you for both financial packages you have already provided us with and the ones you may be willing to decide on. Your money is not charity. It's an investment in the global security and democracy that we handle in the most responsible way. Russia could stop its aggression, really, if it wanted to, but you can speed up our victory. I know it. And it will prove to any potential aggressor that no one can succeed in breaking national borders, no one committing atrocities and reigning over people against their will. It would be naive to wait for steps towards peace from Russia, which enjoys being a terrorist state. Russians are still poisoned by the Kremlin. The restoration of international legal order is our joint task. We need peace. Yes, Ukraine has already offered proposals, which I just discussed with President Biden. Our peace formula 10 points which should and must be implemented for our joint security, guaranteed for decades ahead, and the summit which can be held. I'm glad to stress that President Biden supported our peace initiative today. Each of you, ladies and gentlemen, can assist in the implementation to ensure that America's leadership remains solid, bicameral, and bipartisan. Thank you. You can strengthen sanctions to make Russia feel how ruinous its aggression truly is. It is in your power, really, to help us bring to justice everyone who started this unprovoked and criminal war. Let's do it. Let terrorists let the terrorist state be held responsible for its terror and aggression, and compensate all losses done by this war. Let the world see that the United States are here. Ladies and gentlemen, Americans, in 2 days, we will celebrate Christmas. Maybe candlelit. Not because it's more romantic, no, but because there will be no electricity. Millions won't have neither heating nor running water. All of these will be the result of Russian missile and drone attacks on our energy infrastructure. But we do not complain. We do not judge and compare whose life is easier. Your well-being is the product of your national security, the result of your struggle for independence and your many victories. We, Ukrainians, will also go through our war of independence and freedom with dignity and success. We'll celebrate Christmas. Celebrate Christmas, and even if there is no electricity, the light of our faith in ourselves will not be put out. If Russian missiles attack us, we'll do our best to protect ourselves. If they attack us with Iranian drones and our people will have to go to bomb shelters on Christmas Eve, Ukrainians will still sit down at the holiday table and cheer up each other. And we don't have to know everyone's wish, as we know that all of us, millions of Ukrainians, wish the same: victory. Only victory. We already built strong Ukraine with strong people, strong army, strong institutions together with you. We developed strong security guarantees for our country and for entire Europe and the world together with you. And also together with you, we'll put in place everyone who will defy freedom. Put in. This will be the basis to protect democracy in Europe and the world over. Now, on the special Christmas time, I want to thank you, all of you. I thank every American family which cherishes the warmth of its home and wishes the same warmth to other people. I thank President Biden and both parties at the Senate and the House for your invaluable assistance. I thank your cities and your citizens who supported Ukraine this year, who hosted our Ukrainians, our people, who waved our national flags, who acted to help us. Thank you all. From everyone who is now at the front line, from everyone who is evading victory. Standing here today, I recall the words of the President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which are, I think, so good for this moment. The American people, in their righteous might, will win through to absolute victory. The Ukrainian people will win too, absolutely. I know that everything depends on us, on Ukrainian armed forces, yet so much depends on the world. So much in the world depends on you. When I was in Bakhmut yesterday, our heroes gave me the flag, the battle flag, the flag of those who defend Ukraine, Europe, and the world at the cost of their lives. They asked me to bring this flag to you, to the US Congress, to members of the House of Representatives and senators whose decisions can save millions of people. So let these decisions be taken. Let this flag stay with you, ladies and gentlemen. This flag is a symbol of our victory. In this war, we stand, we fight, and we will win because we are united. Ukraine, America, and the entire free world.
President Zelenskyy in front of the U.S. Congress and the exchange of the Ukrainian flag for an American flag there. He said Ukraine, America, and the free world united. That Ukraine will win this war.
Just one thing, if I can, the last thing, thank you so much. May God protect our brave troops and citizens. May God forever bless the United States of America. Merry Christmas and happy, victorious New Year. Slava Ukraini!
Thanking the American people for their support, the people who have hosted Ukrainians here in this country, who have flown Ukrainian flags in their homes and neighborhoods. He thanked the president. He thanked both parties, Republicans and Democrats, both chambers, the Senate, the House. Unmistakable that he believes that America's support for Ukraine will determine whether or not there is victory here. And he made it clear there will be victory because of the partnership with America. He said Russia can end this war, but he said you can speed up our victory, to both members of the Senate and of the House.
Somebody will carry it.
I can hold.
Okay. We'll turn around.
Yes.
There we go.
Proudly holding the American flag, the exchange of flags taking place. President Zelenskyy saying Ukraine will hold its lines, it will never surrender, that it was a great honor to speak before the U.S. Congress.
This flag was flown over the Capitol today in honor of the president's visit.
Thank you so much. I will take it.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, obviously, explaining to him that that is the flag that flew over the Capitol today to mark this historic visit of a wartime leader as we have been reporting here, the first time a wartime leader since Winston Churchill has addressed the U.S. Congress. He said, "We have defeated Russia in the battle of minds of the world, and it gives us courage to keep going." He thanked America for the partnership from the very beginning. He talked about being outnumbered on the battlefield in every military aspect, troops, weaponry. But he said the Ukraine's defense is holding. There were multiple standing ovations in that room for President Zelenskyy as he made the case for continued partnership. Rachel Scott, who covers Congress, witnessing this as well. Rachel described the scene there up on the Hill.
Truly a remarkable sense of bipartisanship, and one that we do not see very often here in Congress, as members are so divided, as this Congress is so divisive. But there you see it. Republicans, Democrats standing shoulder to shoulder, giving President Zelenskyy a standing ovation. You hear House Speaker Nancy Pelosi closing out this joint meeting of Congress. You could really hear a sense of urgency in Zelenskyy's voice, saying that what Congress decides right now will determine the outcome for future generations in Ukraine. He said the support from the United States is crucial. And of course, this comes at a very critical time as Congress is considering an additional $45 billion in aid to Ukraine, as Republicans are expected to take control of the House in just a matter of weeks. And you heard Zelenskyy there with a very strong warning of what would happen if support from the United States stopped. He said that it will be a matter of time before they strike your allies as well, that this is not charity, that it's an investment in global democracy. And he ended with that powerful moment, a really big sense of unity there. You had the two flags, one that flew over the Capitol here today, and then you had Zelenskyy handing that flag to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the Vice President. David.
Rachel, President Zelenskyy telling lawmakers from both parties that your money is not charity, your money is an investment in democracy, in our fight to preserve our own fragile democracy in Ukraine. Terry Moran, you and I were talking earlier on the air about this particular leader and his ability to connect with people not only in his own country but around the world as he fights Russia on a very human level, talking about Christmas approaching. He said if Ukrainian families have to go to bomb shelters on Christmas Eve, so be it, but that these families would then gather for Christmas and for the future of Ukraine.
I mean, he's an electric performer. He had no preparation for public life aside from being an actor in a sitcom playing the president, and he met the moment that he was given, that this war by Russia in Ukraine, and he and his people have inspired the world with their defiance of Russian brutality. What he did tonight was attempt to connect their struggle for freedom and for their nation with the American story as well. Again and again, he referenced American history and tried to summon up that old sense in American politics that freedom fighters around the world deserve American support.
Terry Moran at the White House. Terry, our thanks to you as always. And as we bid you a good night, President Zelenskyy wishing the American people a Merry Christmas and a happy, victorious New Year, he said, insinuating, obviously, that Ukraine will have victory ahead in this year to come. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live, abcnews.com. For our viewers in the West, I'll be back here with the entire team for World News Tonight. I'm David Muir in New York. Have a good night.
And so there you have the conclusion of the joint meeting there with President Zelenskyy saying that he is banking on Ukrainian courage and American resolve, and saying that this struggle will define what world our children and grandchildren will live in. Let's go to ABC's Jay O'Brien. Jay, just give us a sense of what stood out to you from Zelenskyy's remarks and the reception that he received tonight from both houses of Congress.
Yeah, and this was, Lindsay, a rare moment of bipartisanship. We saw Republicans and Democrats standing in applause of Zelenskyy. There was an acknowledgement of where this sits in the broader arc of American history and of global history. Zelenskyy making reference multiple times to American history, to the Battle of Saratoga, to President Roosevelt in World War II, to the Revolutionary War, talking about a fight for American independence and tying that back to the Ukraine's fight for, as he put it, their independence and their freedom. And then, of course, there are those key moments that stand out. Zelenskyy taking the Ukrainian flag with what looked like signatures and writing on it, presenting it to Speaker Pelosi. They kiss on the cheek. Speaker Pelosi then presents him with the American flag that had flown over the Capitol. These entire remarks meant to bring the war, the front lines of Ukraine, where Zelenskyy was not long ago, to the House of Representatives, to the Senate, to the United States Congress, to those lawmakers who are tasked with the decision of what aid to send to Ukraine right now, as they have that omnibus bill on their plates, $45 billion in aid for Ukraine in that bill, and also in the future, come early January, when Republicans take control of the House of Representatives, and some of their members have been skeptical of aid to Ukraine and how it would continue. So Zelenskyy's overall call was for any future U.S. leadership, in his words here, to be bicameral, meaning both the House and the Senate, and bipartisan. A key acknowledgement there of how tied he believes Ukraine's future success on the battlefield is to its relationship both with the Biden administration and with the Congress, where he just spoke tonight, Lindsay.
Yeah, and I was struck, I have to say, Jay, by when he talked about Christmas, that how for many Ukrainians they may be experiencing Christmas by candlelight, but then he went on to say the light of our faith in ourselves will not be put out. And as you just were touching upon, that we've heard those concerns about some Republicans wanting to pull back on the blank check as far as aid to Ukraine in the next Congress. But Zelenskyy pushed back strongly against that, and I think also kind of tugged at the heartstrings at the same time.
Again, it's bringing those stories from Ukraine to the United States Congress, to people other than Pelosi and other members of Congress who have gone on visits to Ukraine in recent months. Many of them have not. These are people who, like millions of Americans, are watching this war, watching this struggle unfold on television. And now the leader of this country that is fighting for its very survival is standing at the speaker's rostrum and telling them what it is like for him back home, a home he is returning to tonight. Christmas by candlelight and things of that nature. So it speaks to this broader notion that Zelenskyy is laying out for these members of Congress exactly what he believes is at stake. And to your earlier point about that quote you used from Zelenskyy talking about what this means for the children and grandchildren of the world, he's setting this as a fight that he believes transcends national borders, transcends oceans, as he said, and affects the free world everywhere, Lindsay.
And he really was rallying the troops in a way, as we heard him also say, Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking. Jay O'Brien, our thanks to you. I want to bring back in Rachel Scott, who's been watching this with us tonight. Rachel, describe the moment that you just witnessed.
It just really was a remarkable sense of bipartisanship, Lindsay. You know, this is a Congress that is very divided. And so to see that House chamber full with Republicans and Democrats standing shoulder to shoulder, giving Zelenskyy a standing ovation as he walks into the chamber for this historic moment, and then multiple times standing to their feet to show their support for him. Of course, this does come at a key time when Congress is considering billions of dollars in additional military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. And I just thought it was so poignant what Zelenskyy was saying in his message about how this does affect Americans, tying this back to your well-being, being a product of your national security. He said, your investment is not charity, it's an investment in global democracy. And why that is so critical is because Republicans will be taking control of the House come January. And we know that there are a handful of Republicans who have sort of warned against writing these sort of blank checks to Ukraine, signaled that they would not support another vote that would send billions of dollars back to Ukraine. Well, Zelenskyy making this very clear tonight that what the United States, what Congress decides in this moment will determine the outcome for generations to come. And I will just say one last thing here, Lindsay, because you see Zelenskyy there in his fatigues. I mean, this is a leader who was just on the front lines of this war and some of the most hard-torn, war-torn areas in Ukraine. And here he is tonight in Washington, D.C. You see him there handing that flag from that area to the House Speaker. I mean, this is just really a historic moment, extraordinary, what we just witnessed, Lindsay.
And Rachel, you said it, that was actually the line of the night to me when he made that juxtaposition comparing charity versus investment, right? And you did see many of the Republicans applauding, anxiously standing up for him. Was there anything else in particular that struck you from what Zelenskyy said in his address tonight?
You know, I was really always just taken aback by how personal he makes this. And you kind of brought up when he talked about Christmas time, he's so well aware of what Americans are doing during this time of the year, right? We're finishing our holiday shopping, we're getting ready for the holiday season, and he talked about the resilience of the people of Ukraine, that on Christmas, they may have to run into a bomb shelter, but then they'll come right back out to the holiday table. He talked about that resilience of the Ukrainian people, and that's what he wants Americans to think about tonight, how much different their lives are here in the United States than the people in Ukraine. And earlier today, he was asked about what his message is to Americans, and he talked about peace. And I thought that that was so notable because that is something that is now so foreign to his people, to his country, to even his own family, Lindsay.
Wishing us all a happy, victorious New Year. Rachel, our thanks to you. Now I want to bring in ABC News contributor and retired Colonel Steve Ganyard. Steve, you watched this speech tonight along with the rest of us. What sort of impact do you think that this address will have on the actual war that's being fought on Ukrainian soil?
Yeah, Lindsay, I think that President Zelenskyy had to walk a fine line tonight. He wanted to come to the Congress. He wanted to come to the American people and say, truly, thank you for all you have done. It's a lot of money. We appreciate it. But on the other hand, he made it clear that he needs more. We know, because he reminded us tonight, that the Russians continue to use Iranian drones to pummel the electrical grid within Ukraine. There are millions of people without water, without heat tonight in the middle of a very harsh winter because of the way that the Russians have been conducting this war in terms of taking it to the people, trying to bring the economy down. So he got some things today from the president that will be very interesting. A Patriot missile battery, which is the United States Army's frontline missile battery, but there's only one there, so it may be able to protect part of Kyiv, but beyond that, not much else. And remember that the electrical grid is all around the country, so it still will allow the Russians to continue to take out the electrical grid and keep the electricity off. So it's a mixed message, but I think he was very clear tonight on how grateful he was, that he understands that more aid should be coming, but that he also has to overcome some of the hesitancy that we've seen in the past few weeks from the Republicans.
Steve, how critical do you think that Ukraine's success, how much is that tied to actually getting additional money and weapons from America?
Yeah, well, you think about this. The intent of bringing down the electrical grid is to bring down the economy. This really slows down the Ukrainian economy. And if you don't have an economy, then you can't buy the weapons that you need to defend yourself. You can't conduct a war. So I think it's very important that we're sending you. If you looked at that aid package that is up on the Hill tonight, $14 billion of that is in economic aid and electrical support to bring new parts and things that will keep the electrical grid going. So that's very important. But remember, now that we're in the winter time, the battlefield is fairly static. So things are not happening on the ground. But Zelenskyy has been complaining privately, saying, look, you're allowing the Russians to stand off and launch these Iranian drones in and take out my electrical grid. But United States, you're not giving me the tools I need to just defend myself. I'm not even asking for offensive weapons. I just want to defend myself. So this is this dance that the White House has to play with the Congress and with the American people, not getting too far out ahead with some very, very expensive expenditures. So it continues to be tough. The winter's going to be tough, and the springtime will bring potentially a Russian offensive that Zelenskyy will have to deal with here in the coming months.
300 days now into this war, what are your impressions of Zelenskyy and how he has handled this war and representing his country?
Yeah, Lindsay, I think 301 days ago, you and I were talking about this, and I said I didn't think it was going to happen, and I was proven wrong. But I think there were a lot of people who were saying that if it did happen, that the Russians would quickly be in Kyiv and this would all be over. I think that still is absolutely remarkable about the resiliency of the Ukrainian people, the ability of the Ukrainian military to adapt to overcome extraordinary circumstances, and of course the assistance that came from the U.S. and from NATO, saving the day in many ways, just giving them the tools they need to defend their country, and the fact that they have done as well as they have. And I think the Russians have only about 16% of the country right now, so continuing to push back, but still a long way to go before we see a resolution to this terrible war.
Steve Ganyard, our thanks to you. And now let's go to Terry Moran, who's at the White House. Terry, you were there for that joint press conference with Presidents Biden and Zelenskyy this afternoon. This visit does have some echoes, as we've been discussing, of history when another wartime leader visited the U.S. How do you think Zelenskyy's speech tonight will be remembered ultimately?
It was a remarkable moment, as Rachel said, a moment of bipartisanship and a moment that reminded America, those who were listening, of who we are to the rest of the world. Those cascades of applause, the roars that came from both sides of the aisle for Vladimir Zelenskyy. He did that. The Ukrainian people did that by demonstrating the courage and character in the face of brutality and a struggle for freedom and nationhood. And I think that has connected with the American people. If you look at polls, Ukraine has about 2-to-1 favorable versus unfavorable opinion among Americans. And he, I think, is a big part of that. One of the things that you see in this speech is his effort to connect that struggle that his people have to our struggle as a nation, and to remind Americans that the shining city on a hill that Ronald Reagan used to talk about, that the country is to the world, still has the power to inspire and to assist, to help in the freedom fight that Ukrainians are in. He's a remarkable leader for his people, and I think the applause, the rare moment of togetherness in the Congress for him speaks about his leadership and about the people he leads.
And do you feel that he touched on all the bases adequately that he needed to tonight, Terry?
I do. I think Rachel once again had that emotion, that authentic emotion. Look, he's an actor, a trained actor over many years, but he brings to these moments an authenticity. He seems to be showing you who he is, and who he is passionate in defense of his people and in his appreciation for what America has already done. The part of this speech where he spoke of a candlelight Christmas in Ukraine, not because it's more romantic, but because people are in the dark and in the cold and in fear under the Russian onslaught. That can't help but connect. Americans are generous people. We are people who consider ourselves idealists. And when someone rises, as Zelenskyy has, from the battlefields of Ukraine to ask for help for people struggling for their freedom, I think that strikes a chord with the majority of Americans, as polls show. And I think one of the reasons you see Republicans on their feet, even though there's a strong segment of the Republican Party that doesn't think another dime should go to Ukraine, is because they can read the polls too. They know that he is talking an all-American kind of appeal, and that is one of the reasons you see that bipartisan enthusiasm for his historic achievements and for the struggle that he has to face ahead.
The light of our faith in ourselves will not be put out, as he said it so well tonight. Terry Moran from the White House. Thanks so much, Terry. Now I want to bring in former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense and ABC News contributor Mick Mulroy. He joins us now. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. First, let's talk about the timing of this trip. How crucial is U.S. support at this point in the war?
It's incredibly crucial. Right now, we have somewhat of a lull in the fighting because of the winter. The Russians have already said openly that they're using this time to develop their own ability to do an offensive in the spring. And we need to be working with the Ukrainians to give them the ability to go on the offensive, because you cannot win a war on the defensive. Patriot missile system, very important, but it's a defensive system. We now need to focus on what we can do to support the Ukrainians, so that when the fighting kicks back in earnest, the Ukrainians are going to be the ones to get the initiative, and they're going to be the ones that are going to be taking back terrain from the Russians.
Today, President Biden officially pledged to supply Ukraine with Patriot missiles. It's certainly the most advanced weapon we've contributed to Ukraine's war effort so far. So advanced that it'll take considerable time to train Ukrainian forces to use them. Realistically, could they be in the field and in use in time for this critical winter season?
I think so, absolutely. And I think it's worth the investment. Quite frankly, once you can train the Ukrainian soldiers who have proven their ability to learn very complicated U.S. weapon systems, but once they learn this, they can use their own trainers to train additional Ukrainians. So when we send more batteries so we can protect more of the civilian infrastructure. This could get easier as it goes forward because there will be a group of trained Ukrainians who are going to be more efficient when training other Ukrainians. And I think that's a very important point because we start now. It will only get better for the Ukrainians when it comes to defending their critical energy infrastructure.
Another major piece of equipment, including in this aid package, the kits that are intended to convert dumb bombs to smart bombs. How significant an impact could these have for Ukraine's capabilities?
Very significant. That's a really good question. So the gravity bombs, the dumb bombs, they essentially drop them and they just project where they're going to be. Oftentimes they don't hit where you intend. But these JDAM systems you can put onto dumb bombs to make them smart, essentially, and you can become very accurate so that every munition that you spend ends up hitting the target, hitting a Russian, destroying their capability, and basically advancing your strategic goals in this conflict. So it is a very big deal. It might not be as sexy, so to speak, as a Patriot missile system, but it could have just as big of an impact on the battlefield.
Will this aid package enable Ukraine to go fully on the offensive to reclaim Russian-held territories?
So that's still to be determined. I haven't seen exactly what not only the $2 billion that was announced today by President Biden, but of course this omnibus with this $40+ billion. I believe if it includes transport helicopters, helicopter that can provide close air support like the Apache, of course fixed wing aircraft like fighters and bombers, that could allow them to go completely on the offensive, plus armored personnel carriers and tanks. And this could completely change the battlefield in advantage of the Ukrainians. The U.S. weapon systems are much more advanced and much more significant than the Russians. It just needs some motivated, trained individuals, and I think we have that in the Ukrainians.
And as you know, some Americans are seeing all this and wondering just how much we're going to spend to defend Ukraine. For those with doubts, what is the U.S. interest here?
So, Lindsay, our national security strategy places Russia as in the top two of our adversaries with China, and number one when it comes to a threat to the international order. We are spending the equivalent of less than 5% of our national defense budget in 1 year. And the Ukrainians have taken that and they've destroyed 50% of Russian combat power. Just looking at it from the U.S. national security perspective, that is a great ratio. The Ukrainians have shown that they can fight and beat the Russians, and our support is making that key. And it is it's an advantage to the United States and our national security interest.
Meanwhile, Russia has made it clear that they see the Patriots as a sign of escalation from the U.S. What's the concern about further provoking President Putin?
Well, President Putin realizes now, I think, that he can't win conventionally in Ukraine. That's why he's turned to destroying the civilian infrastructure. He's going to use bluster a lot. He's going to threaten nuclear weapons a lot, which is completely irresponsible. And as everybody in your audience knows, we have nuclear weapons too. But this is a defensive weapon system, and they wouldn't have to use it if Russia wasn't attacking them. So I don't think that this is anywhere near the level that would cause a conflict between the United States and Russia. It is something we absolutely should do and probably should double down on once they learn how to utilize it effectively.
You know, as you heard there, President Zelenskyy concluded his address tonight by saying, have a happy, victorious New Year. Do you think that it is possible that Ukraine could be able to consider themselves victorious in 2023?
So it is a bit hard to see how this war could come to an end in 2023. But I would point out, when this war started in February, most people had Ukraine losing losing Kyiv in 3 days and losing their country in 3 weeks. And that certainly didn't happen. So nobody should count out the Ukrainians. They certainly have the tenacity, they have the willpower, and they have the skill to do it. They need the United States to be there to provide the support, to be the leader of the free world, to be the best form of the United States, which is that role, leading the free world. That's why President Zelenskyy brought that up tonight, and hopefully it played well with everybody that has to make the decision on supporting Ukraine in Congress in the future.
Mick Mulroy, we thank you so much for your insight and your time tonight. We're going to be back live at 9 o'clock. For the moment, this is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us.